In medieval England, feeding a child was an act of caution as much as care. High infant mortality, fragile health, and limited medical knowledge made every meal a quiet risk. Food could heal, but it could also harm. Children needed nourishment that was gentle, predictable, and safe. Milk pottage, soft, warm, and modest, became a daily safeguard, designed not to please the palate, but to protect a vulnerable life still learning how to endure. In medieval England, childhood was understood as a period of physical fragility rather than strength. Medical thinking at the time, influenced by humoral theory, viewed children as inherently unbalanced, too moist, too warm, and therefore easily disturbed. Their bodies were believed to lack the internal stability of adults, making them more vulnerable to illness, digestive upset, and sudden decline. Because of this perception, caregivers approached children's diets with caution. Heavy meats, coarse breads, and strongly seasoned foods were often delayed until later childhood. Such foods were thought to burden the stomach, thicken the humours, or provoke sickness. Instead, early diets emphasised softness, warmth, and moderation, qualities believed to support gradual growth rather than force it. Daily life reinforced these beliefs. High rates of childhood illness were visible in every community. Fevers, stomach complaints, and weakness were common, and recovery was uncertain. Without effective medical treatments, prevention became essential. Food choices were one of the few tools families could control. Feeding gently was seen as a way to avoid triggering illness, rather than curing it after it appeared. In this context, meals for children were shaped less by preference than by fear of harm. The goal was not to accelerate growth, but to protect a body considered unfinished and easily overwhelmed. Milk pottage fit neatly within this worldview, offering nourishment that aligned with prevailing ideas of bodily care and restraint. Milk pottage was valued largely because it was considered easy to digest. Its soft texture required little chewing, reducing strain on young mouths and developing teeth. Warm preparation further supported digestion, as warmth was believed to aid the stomach's ability to process food without disruption. Together, milk and grain formed a simple, predictable mixture that caregivers trusted. Unlike solid foods that could sit heavily in the stomach, milk pottage moved smoothly through the body. Grain provided sustenance, while milk softened and diluted it, making the combination gentler than bread alone. This balance mattered in a time when digestive trouble could quickly lead to weakness or prolonged illness in children. Milk pottage also allowed careful control over consistency. For very young or sick children, it could be thinned to reduce effort and risk. As strength returned, it could be thickened slightly, matching the child's condition. This adaptability made it a practical solution in households without medical guidance but rich in lived experience. I can sense how deliberate this choice was. Feeding children was not about filling them quickly, but about avoiding mistakes. Milk pottage reflects a quiet attentiveness, an understanding that in fragile bodies, gentleness itself was a form of protection. Milk pottage relied on ingredients that were already part of everyday domestic life. In rural and village households across medieval England, milk commonly came from family-owned cows or goats. Even when fresh milk was limited by season or yield, small quantities could be reserved for children, whose needs were prioritized within the household. This made milk a familiar and accessible resource, rather than a luxury. Grain was even more central. Oats, barley, or wheat fragments were staple foods stored in nearly every home. These grains were used daily for breads, porridges, and thickened stews. Preparing milk pottage required no special ingredients beyond what families already possessed, nor did it demand advanced skills or tools. A pot, a hearth, and time were enough. This simplicity mattered. Medieval households operated under constant pressure from labour demands, seasonal shortages, and illness. Meals that fit smoothly into existing routines reduced risk and effort. Milk pottage could be prepared alongside other daily foods, without disrupting work or requiring additional expense. Because of this, milk pottage became embedded in domestic rhythm. It was not an exceptional dish prepared only in times of illness, but a dependable option woven into everyday care. Its availability reinforced its trustworthiness, making it a natural choice for feeding children in households that valued reliability over experimentation. Medieval medical thought strongly influenced dietary decisions, especially for vulnerable groups like children. According to humoral theory, health depended on maintaining balance between bodily qualities such as heat, cold, dryness, and moisture. Children were believed to possess excess warmth and moisture, which made them sensitive to imbalance and illness. Foods were therefore evaluated not only for nourishment but for their perceived qualities. Milk pottage was classified as warm and moist, a combination thought to calm the body and support gentle growth. Unlike dry bread or heavily salted meat, it was not believed to provoke internal disturbance. This alignment with medical theory reassured caregivers that they were acting wisely. Milk itself was viewed as nourishing and mild, particularly suitable for young bodies transitioning from breastfeeding to solid food. Grain, when softened through cooking, was seen as stabilizing rather than taxing. Together, they formed a meal that fit neatly within accepted medical logic. Diet was also adjusted according to age and condition. What was appropriate for an adult labourer was not considered suitable for a child. Milk pottage reflected this distinction clearly, embodying the belief that proper care required tailoring food to bodily state rather than applying one standard to all. One of the quiet strengths of milk pottage was its flexibility. Medieval households lived with constant uncertainty. Harvests failed, animals fell ill, and supplies fluctuated with the seasons. A child's food needed to adapt to these changing conditions without placing additional strain on the household. Milk pottage allowed exactly that. Its thickness could be adjusted depending on circumstance. When milk was plentiful, the pottage could be richer and more sustaining. In lean periods, it could be thinned with water or made with smaller amounts of grain, stretching limited resources while still offering warmth and nourishment. This adaptability made it reliable even in times of scarcity. Ingredients could also change subtly. Different grains were used depending on region and availability, and sweetness or flavouring was rarely necessary. The focus remained on function rather than taste. Milk pottage did not demand consistency in recipe. Only consistency in purpose was spoiled. This ability to adjust reduced risk. Families did not need to abandon the dish when conditions worsened. Instead, they modified it, preserving a familiar food that children could tolerate. In a world where sudden change often meant danger, such flexibility helped maintain continuity of care even when circumstances forced compromise. Milk pottage was closely tied to daily routines of care within the household. It was most often prepared by mothers, older siblings, or caregivers who observed children's condition closely. Feeding was not a separate task, but part of the rhythm of domestic life, woven between work, rest, and recovery. The dish was commonly served at regular times, reinforcing predictability. For children, this routine provided comfort as well as nourishment. Meals became signals of safety, rest, and attention, particularly during illness or weakness. Milk pottage was often associated with periods of convalescence, when gentle feeding supported slow return to strength. Because it required patience rather than speed, its preparation reflected attentiveness. Stirring over the hearth, adjusting texture, and serving it warm demanded time. These small acts reinforced bonds between caregiver and child even when resources were limited. I feel that milk pottage carried more than nutrition. It represented care expressed through routine, quiet, repetitive, and easily overlooked. In that bowl, survival depended not on abundance, but on patience and watchful attention. For young children in medieval England, solid food carried real danger. Choking was a constant risk, especially during teething or periods of illness when strength and coordination were reduced. Medical intervention in such cases was limited or non-existent, making prevention the only reliable defense. Soft foods like milk pottage lowered these risks significantly. Its smooth texture required minimal chewing and could be swallowed easily, even by children weakened by fever or digestive trouble. When illness struck, appetite often declined, but milk pottage could still be taken in small manageable amounts. This made it especially valuable during recovery, when nourishment was needed but effort had to be minimized. Milk pottage also reduced strain on the digestive system. Hard breads and dense foods could irritate the stomach or remain undigested, leading to discomfort or further illness. By contrast, the combination of milk and softened grain was believed to pass through the body gently, causing fewer complications. In this way, milk pottage functioned as a protective measure. It did not promise strength or rapid growth, but it reduced the chances of sudden harm. In a setting where even small setbacks could become fatal, lowering everyday risks was essential to keeping children alive. Milk pottage was not a food of status or celebration. It appeared in households across social classes, from rural cottages to more modest urban homes. Because its ingredients were common and its preparation simple, it carried no special prestige. This ordinariness was precisely what made it dependable. Unlike festive dishes or rare treats, Milk pottage was rarely recorded or praised. It left little mark in written sources because it belonged to routine, not occasion. Yet its presence was steady and widespread, forming part of what many children encountered in their earliest years. Its role as a standard food reinforced expectations around childhood. Children were not fed as miniature adults, nor were they indulged with rich foods. Simplicity was normalized. A plain, nourishing meal was considered appropriate, even virtuous, reflecting values of restraint and care rather than excess. Because milk pottage was so ordinary, it shaped childhood quietly. It taught regularity, moderation, and patience long before such concepts could be named. In its simplicity, it defined what was considered proper nourishment for the young. Milk pottage played a modest but important role in improving children's chances of survival in medieval England. It provided steady nourishment at a time when food insecurity and illness were constant threats. Rather than offering bursts of strength, it supported continuity, helping children maintain enough energy to endure periods of weakness or recovery. During illness, when appetite was low and the body fragile, milk pottage often remained tolerable. Its warmth and softness made it easier to consume than solid foods, allowing children to take in nourishment even when they could manage only small amounts. This mattered greatly in an era when prolonged weakness could quickly become fatal. Milk pottage also supported gradual growth. By delivering calories in a controlled, digestible form, it reduced the risk of digestive distress that could follow heavier meals. This stability helped children maintain body strength over time, rather than pushing their bodies beyond what they could manage. Survival in childhood was rarely dramatic. It depended on small advantages accumulated day after day. Milk pottage contributed to this quiet resilience, offering consistency in a world defined by uncertainty. Its impact was not sudden or visible, but it shaped outcomes through repetition, one careful meal at a time. Milk pottage answered the needs of vulnerable children with restraint rather than excess. Its value lay not in richness or flavour, but in safety, adaptability and trust. Caregivers chose it because it aligned with what they observed daily. Fragile bodies needed gentleness more than stimulation. Food choices in medieval households reflected responsibility. Feeding children meant minimizing risk and responding to signs of weakness or recovery. Milk pottage embodied this cautious care, fitting into medical beliefs, domestic routines, and practical limits without demanding more than families could give. I am struck by how much responsibility rested in such a simple bowl. Feeding children was an act of protection, guided by experience and observation rather than theory. That quiet vigilance feels deeply human. This history reminds us that child nutrition has always been shaped by context. Medieval caregivers worked within limited knowledge and resources, yet prioritized safety and gentleness. Understanding these choices helps us move beyond modern assumptions and recognize early nutritional care as an adaptive, thoughtful response to real conditions.